Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're taking a look at a really fascinating piece of political writing, Niccolò Machiavelli's The Prince. It's amazing how, even after 500 years, this book still pushes buttons.
It really does. And the name Machiavelli itself, it almost instantly brings up ideas of, well, cynicism and ruthless power politics.
Yeah, like a synonym for evil scheming.
Exactly. And a lot of that, as our sources point out, actually comes from later propaganda, particularly during the Counter-Reformation. They judged him purely on sort of traditional moral grounds, which wasn't really his focus.
Right, so if you're new to this, you probably think of him in that phrase, the ends justify the means. But looking at the source material, it's much more profound, isn't it? It feels like a real turning point.
Oh, absolutely. A fundamental break. It marks the beginning of what we'd call the modern political era.
And he wasn't just some lone wolf thinking this stuff up, right?
No, not at all. That's what's so interesting. He was incredibly perceptive. One source calls him the genius who kind of crystallized ideas that were already floating around among his contemporaries in Renaissance Italy.
So our mission today is to unpack those core ideas, the ones that really shocked people back then and honestly still resonate, and then we need to get into that big debate.
Ah, yes, the million-dollar question. Was The Prince a genuine how-to guide for tyrants, or was it actually a kind of satire, a critique?
Okay, so the shock factor. What was it that made this book so different?
Well, traditionally, political philosophy was all about morality,
Right.
what makes a good ruler in a spiritual sense.
Machiavelli just throws that out the window.
He just ignores it.
Pretty much. His approach was radically realistic. He described politics as he saw it, not as maybe people wished it would be. As one source puts it, he made no allowance whatsoever for motivations of a spiritual, moral, or traditionalist nature that would disturb the strict rationality of power politics.
Wow. Okay, so it's purely about the mechanics of power. Exactly. Political craftsmanship. Effectiveness over idealism.
All right, let's get into the foundations then. If a prince wants to build a state that lasts, what does Machiavelli say are the absolute essentials?
He boils it down to two things. Good laws and good arms. Simple as that.
Good laws and good weapons, basically.
Yep. You need a solid legal framework and a reliable military force. If either one is shaky, he says the ruler is bound to come to grief. You need both.
Okay. And this leads us to those two famous concepts he uses to explain how things happen in politics, fortuna and virtù.
Right. Fortune, that's fortune or fate. It's everything unpredictable, chance, luck, circumstances, the stuff that just happens. It's completely outside the ruler's control.
Like a storm hitting or a sudden economic crash.
Precisely. He saw it as this powerful force, like a raging river, maybe governing half of everything that happens.
Half? Wow. So what's the other half?
That's where virtù comes in.
Yeah.
It's often translated as prowess or skill. It's the ruler's ability, their capacity to actually manage that fortuna, to respond to the chaos effectively.
But, and this is crucial, isn't it? This virtue he's talking about, it's not virtue in the way we usually think of it, like being morally good.
Not even close. And that's the revolutionary bit. Before Machiavelli, virtue did mean moral goodness, piety, honesty, generosity. Machiavelli completely redefines it.
So what does it mean for him?
For him, virtue is about political competence. It's skill, strategy, strength, the ability to do whatever is necessary to maintain the state and achieve your goals. It's about effectiveness, not morality.
So if fortuna is the flooding river,
Then virtue is the skill to build the dams and canals, to navigate the floodwaters, maybe even use them to your advantage. It's about mastering the circumstances you're given.
that makes sense. He creates this image of the ideal prince, maybe not one specific person, but an archetype.
Exactly. An archetype who uses this virtue to battle Fortuna and hopefully save Italy from the constant chaos and warfare it was experiencing. He wasn't picky about who did it. He just wanted someone, anyone, to succeed.
It feels quite pragmatic, almost nationalistic in a way.
It is. And you see that same pragmatism in his military thinking too, right? In his other book, The Art of War,
Arte della guerra, yeah. What was his main point there?
he strongly advocated for a national militia. Rely on your own citizens, train them, arm them. Don't depend on mercenaries.
Why not mercenaries? They were common then.
Because they're expensive, unreliable, and ultimately loyal only to money, not to the prince or the state. He saw relying on them as a major weakness.
Which sounds like good advice, but you mentioned it was kind of out of season.
Yeah, historically it was. Even though it made sense, the trend across Europe was actually moving towards professional mercenary armies. So his idea, while rooted in Republican ideals and Roman history, didn't really catch on at the time. He was looking back. in a way.
Okay, let's shift to really controversial stuff. The advice that got him labeled, well, Machiavellian. The famous question. Is it better to be loved or feared?
Ah, yes.
Yeah.
Chapter 17. He tackles it head on. He says, ideally, you'd want to be both. But, he says, love and fear can hardly exist together. They're difficult to maintain simultaneously. So if you have to choose,
Choose fear.
he concludes it's far safer to be feared than loved.
Okay, but that sounds like a recipe for disaster. Doesn't ruling by fear just make people hate you, eventually leading to rebellion?
That's the absolutely critical nuance that often gets missed. He's not advocating for terror or cruelty for its own sake. While fear is safer because it's more constant, people are self-interested, fear of punishment works. The prince must, above all else, endeavor to escape being hated.
Ah, so fear is okay, even necessary, but hatred is fatal.
Exactly. Hatred is the destabilizer. Fear, properly managed, can create order. Hatred creates enemies who will stop at nothing.
So the goal is respect, backed by credible force, but never contempt or outright hatred.
Precisely. And this leads to one of his most striking lines. The best fortress that exists is to avoid being hated by the people.
Forget castles and walls.
Well, not entirely, but his point is, if the people genuinely hate you, no physical fortress will protect you forever. If they don't hate you, maybe even grudgingly respect you, you're much more secure. Public opinion is the ultimate defense.
This really throws traditional morality out the window, doesn't it? The only thing that matters is the outcome, stability, security.
Yes, and that's why he seems to blur the lines between virtue and vice. The value of an action isn't inherent. It depends entirely on the context and the result.
Can you give an example of that? Like when a traditional virtue could be bad?
Sure, take generosity. Seems like a virtue, right?
Yeah.
But Machiavelli warns that if a prince is too generous, constantly giving things away, he'll eventually run out of money.
And then he has to raise taxes.
Exactly. And raising taxes will make people hate him far more than his earlier generosity made them love him. So the virtue of generosity, if practiced unwisely, actually leads to ruin.
So sometimes a vice, like being seen as a bit stingy, might actually lead to better long-term security.
That's his argument. He says a prince will find that some of the things that appear to be virtues will, if he practices them, ruin him. And some of the things that appear to be vices will bring security. It's about calculated action, sometimes even necessary evil.
And appearance matters more than reality.
Often, yes.
Right.
He advises princes to appear merciful, faithful, humane, religious, even if they sometimes have to act contrary to those qualities in private to secure the state.
Because most people judge based on what they see on the surface.
Right. The masses see the results, the image. Few get close enough to see the reality. And he justifies this whole perspective, interestingly, by saying, you need to understand everyone, he wrote. To comprehend fully the nature of princes, one must be an ordinary citizen.
So you need the view from the ground up to understand how power works from the top down.
Exactly. He saw that the rulers and the ruled have different perspectives, different needs, and a successful prince has to grasp both.
And that understanding of human nature may be a bit cynical, seeing people as selfish, ambitious. That's why the book still feels relevant, isn't it?
Absolutely. That perceived unchanging core of human nature is why his advice, especially on something like implementing change, feels like it could have been written yesterday for, say, a CEO or a political reformer.
Oh, that passage about initiating a new system, it's incredibly sharp.
It really is. It perfectly captures why reform is so incredibly difficult.
Let's break it down. He starts by saying how tough it is.
Yeah, he says, it must be considered that there is nothing more difficult to carry out, nor more doubtful of success, nor more dangerous to handle than to initiate a new system.
Okay, hold on. Why dangerous?
Think about it. The moment you propose changing the existing system, the Ordine, you instantly create enemies.
Ah, the people benefiting from the way things are now.
Precisely. He says, for the reformer has enemies and all those who profit by the old system. And these people will fight you tooth and nail because they have a vested interest in keeping things the same. They stand to lose something.
Makes sense. But what about the people who would benefit from the change? Surely they'd be strong supporters.
You think so, right? But Machiavelli points out they are often only lukewarm defenders in all those who would profit by the new system.
Lukewarm. Why only lukewarm?
Because they haven't actually seen the benefits yet. It's still theoretical for them. There's risk, uncertainty. They're cautious.
And he nails the reason for that lukewarmness, doesn't he?
He does. He says, this lukewarmness arising partly from the incredulity of mankind who does not truly believe in anything new until they actually have experience of it.
Wow. People just don't trust novelty until it's proven. That feels so true even today in like corporate change management or political campaigns.
It's spot on. You see it all the time. The defenders of the status quo are passionate and organized. The potential beneficiaries of change are hesitant, waiting to see if it works, unwilling to commit fully until the risk is gone. It explains so many failed reforms.
Okay, this all leads us perfectly into the big mystery surrounding the book itself. All this pragmatic, sometimes brutal advice, was he really telling rulers to act this way? Let's get into the great debate. Manual or satire?
Right. Argument A. It's a realist manual, maybe even a job application.
Explain that. The job application part sounds cynical.
Well, look at his circumstances. He'd been a top diplomat for the Florentine Republic. Then the Medici family comes back, takes over, tortures him, exiles him. He's out of work, out of favor.
So he writes The Prince and dedicates it to Lorenzo de' Medici.
Exactly. It's like saying, look, I understand power. I know how you got it. And more importantly, I know how you can keep it in this chaotic world. Hire me. It's a demonstration of his political expertise, a practical guide based on the harsh realities of Renaissance Italy.
The foundation of real politics based on practical needs, not morals.
Pretty much. And this is where that ends justify the means idea really takes hold, even if he didn't use the exact phrase. The interpretation is he was telling the Medici, your goal's stability, holding on to power justifies actions that might seem morally questionable.
Okay, that's a strong case for the manual theory. What about argument B, the satire?
Argument B says, no way. Machiavelli was a die-hard Republican at heart. You see that clearly in his later, much longer work, The Discourses on Livy.
So why write The Prince, then, which seems to advise a single ruler?
The theory here is that it's incredibly clever, dark satire, a warning disguised as advice.
How does that work? What's the evidence?
Well, first, he wrote it in Italian, the common language, not Latin, which was the language of the elite scholars and rulers.
So it wasn't just for Lorenzo de' Medici's eyes.
Maybe not exclusively.
Yeah.
Writing it in the vernacular meant ordinary literate people could potentially read it. It would have, as some argue, laid bare the secrets of power in plain language for everyone to see exactly how tyrants think and operate.
Exposing the playbook, basically.
Exactly. And then there's the poison pill theory.
Poison pill.
The idea is that some of the advice, while sounding plausible, could actually be disastrous if a ruler followed it literally. Things like advising the prince to arm the populace or get rid of fortresses.
Wait, arming the people sounds dangerous for a prince, and getting rid of fortresses?
Right. A Republican would want the people armed to defend their liberty. A prince might see it as a way to create a loyal militia, but it could easily backfire. Getting rid of fortresses removes a symbol of princely power and a refuge in times of trouble. The argument is that Machiavelli might have been subtly giving advice that could lead to the Medici's downfall and the return of the republic he loved.
Wow, that's incredibly clever, if true. A sort of political booby trap.
It's a fascinating interpretation. It makes the book a kind of dark political comedy, exposing the absurdity and evil of tyranny by pretending to endorse it.
So the debate really hinges on his true intention, which we might never know for sure.
Probably not. But what's undeniable, regardless of whether it was a sincere manual or a brilliant satire, is the power of the analysis itself. The insights into human nature, power dynamics, and political strategy are so sharp, so unflinching.
Which means, either way you read it, it remains this incredibly profound look at political reality. It sort of forced everyone to stop talking just about ideals and start looking at how power actually works.
Absolutely. It dragged political thought into the modern era by focusing on effectiveness, on the is rather than the ought.
Okay, so to wrap up, whether The Prince was meant as a practical guide or a scathing warning, its legacy is its ruthless clarity about the mechanics of power.
A clarity based on observing the world as it is, not as we wish it were.
Which leaves us with maybe a final thought for you, the listener. If the methods described in The Prince, the strategies for gaining and holding power, the manipulation of appearances, the calculated use of fear are still so recognizable and arguably effective today.
So effective that we still debate after 5 centuries whether it's genuine advice or a satirical warning.
What does that very ambiguity, that difficulty in telling the real manual from the supposed expose, tell us about the fundamental nature and perhaps the enduring success of deception and ruthless pragmatism in politics and power?